Hey there, guys and gals. Welcome to Middle School B. This is going to be our first review lesson, our Unit 0 lesson. Now, I want to note strongly that depending on what class you're coming from and all of those things, especially since these videos are generally targeted at homeschool students, this may not actually be review. This may be brand new content, and if that's true, don't worry. We're gonna go nice and slow and take all the details and get lots of practice and do lots of things. We're essentially theoretic. It kind of, again, depending on when you take this class, you should have seen negatives before, but that may not even be the case. So if you've never seen using negatives before, don't stress. That's what we're going to start learning, and we're going to treat this like you've never seen it before. So we're not going to go quickly. We're going to not do a fast ass bullet point review. We're going to actually dive into all these puzzle pieces. So what are integers is the title of today's lesson, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So integers specifically are both, and this is important because this gets confusing sometimes, integers are both positives and negatives. Okay? They are whole numbers that are positive and negative. So, what do we mean whole numbers? Well, what we mean by whole numbers, now if you've never seen that little symbol right there, that represents the word numbers. I use it a lot. So, I'll label it in this video. And after this, I'll just assume that you know it. I might remind you a time or two, but that represents numbers, the pound sign, or as you Gen Zs and such would call it, the hashtag. us old folks call it the pound sign. But whatever you call it, this represents numbers, right? Okay, so back to integers, back to where we were. Whole numbers. So what are we talking about? So specifically, we are not talking about fractions. So this, whether it was positive or negative, would not be an integer. Or another example that would not be an integer would be negative 0.8. That's not an integer. So we're not talking about decimals or fractions or percents or any of those kind of things. We're talking about positive and we're talking about negative whole numbers. Now, we oftentimes like to represent positive and negative whole numbers on a number line. Okay, so let's do that real quick. This is overall going to be a short video, which I'm sure you've seen from the timestamps and all of those things. So this is how we represent integers on a number line. First of all, on our number line, we use a straight edge when we draw it. I should have said that. Make sure, especially if you're one of my students, but even if you're not one of my students, you really should, when you're drawing straight lines, whether it's a number line or rectangles or whatever else, when the lines are supposed to be straight, draw them straight. And what do you need in order to draw them straight? You need a straight edge. I recommend a ruler, but the side of your textbook works just great as well. You need something straight. Okay, so what we mark on our number line is the first thing we mark is 0. 0 doesn't have to be in the middle. Right? It does not have to be, although often, especially at this point, it is. Okay, so we put the number 0 right there. Now, on a number line, positive numbers go to the right, and negative numbers go to the left. So it would look something like this. We would have marks. We'll learn later that you don't always have to count by ones. You can decide to count by whatever you want to count by, but we'll talk about that later. For now, we're just talking about integers specifically. So what we're adding is this side of the number line, all our negatives, right? So then we would label those with numbers. So 1, 2. You don't technically have to label them all. We're going to on this example, but you don't necessarily have to. Watch that handwriting. We gotta be careful and go slow enough. I gotta remind myself sometimes when I'm doing it, I get to talking and get excited, and sometimes I even make mistakes. So it's important, though. You know, when my students will tell me things like, "I don't have good handwriting. My handwriting is bad." So there's a really simple 2-word solution to that problem. Slow down. The only way to have good handwriting is to go slow enough that your handwriting looks good. Let me give you an example. If I want to write that 2, I can write it slow, and I can write a really pretty 2. Even if I'm doing this more kind of cursive style 2, I can do something like that. Or I can do a 2 like that. And that looks like, what in the world? Is that a question mark? Or is that a 2? And that's the difference between going fast, and then we can slow down a little bit, and it gets a little better, and we go down a little slower, and it gets even better. And we go nice and slow and practice, and we can do a really pretty looking 2, et cetera, et cetera. So I know there's a lot of tangents early on in these middle school classes, because I want to make sure we get all these kind of fundamentals really, really solidly in there. So that's kind of what the reason for that is. Let's finish up labeling this. -3. For some reason, 3s are kind of my kryptonite. 3s and 8s for drawing them. -4. So you can see as we go more negative, the numbers start out small, close to 0, and then get more and more negative. They get bigger. They get bigger and bigger as we go to the left. So that is what integers are. In our next lesson, we're going to talk about adding integers. We've already done adding positives. You've probably done lots and lots of that. We're going to look at adding negative numbers next time. So I will see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye, and we shall see you